Have any of you guys seen the absolute bloodbath happening over at PlayStation right now? I mean, seriously, dude, we all knew that their big live service push was gonna end in tears, but this is just straight up comedy at this point. Just yesterday, the news dropped from their latest earnings report that Sony had to record a massive $765 million impairment loss on their Bungie acquisition. Like, they spent almost $4 billion on the studio that brought us Halo and Destiny just a couple years ago, and now they're losing hundreds of millions of dollars because it turns out paying billions for a studio only to have them make a live service extraction shooter isn't such a great business strategy. And the real kicker, they're practically betting the whole farm on Marathon, a $40 extraction shooter that launched back in March to around 88,000 concurrent players on Steam, and it's been dropping like a rock ever since. I mean, these days these guys are barely reaching 20,000. Like, sure, okay, 88,000 players at launch sounds okay if you're an indie developer making a game in your basement, but for a game that allegedly cost over $200 million and is supposed to be the lifeboat keeping Bungie afloat, yeah, it's pretty bad right now. And what about Destiny 2? That game was supposed to be Bungie's golden goose. Well, apparently things are looking so incredibly bleak over there that Bungie had to practically gut the Destiny 2 development team just to drag them over to try and salvage Marathon. Destiny 2 is sinking further and further into the drain, with total player numbers hitting absolute historical lows. We're talking about a game that used to dominate the market, now reduced to a skeleton crew because the studio panicked. Bungie's gone through a lot of severe structural changes to their company since the Sony acquisition, letting go of around 17% of their global workforce and moving 155 roles directly into Sony Entertainment. They essentially lost their independence. Even their CEO, Pete Parsons, who led Bungie for over 2 decades, just stepped down last year. I saw Paul Tassi from Forbes reporting on this whole mess, pointing out how Destiny 2 wasn't even mentioned in Sony's latest financial roadmap. Not a single word. It's like they just shoved it into the closet and hoped that nobody would notice. Meanwhile, the remaining loyal Destiny fans are walking around with the surprised Pikachu face like they can't believe their beloved franchise is getting left in the dust for an extraction shooter, a genre that gamers are already screaming that they don't want anymore. And honestly, dude, it's just sad to watch. Bungie used to feel untouchable. They used to set the trends. Now they're just trying to chase them. It's like going to your favorite burger place, the one that's been making the best handmade patties for over a decade, and then suddenly the owner comes out and says, "Hey, we don't sell burgers anymore. We only sell boiled cabbage because a consultant notified us that cabbage is currently trending." That's exactly what PlayStation is doing right now. They used to be the undisputed kings of the single-player cinematic narrative experiences like God of War, The Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, games that felt like events, but now they're acting like a degenerate gambler at a slot machine in Vegas. They're throwing millions of dollars into the hero shooter and extraction shooter genres, hoping to hit the Fortnite jackpot. We had Jim Ryan championing this whole mandate to release like 12 live service games by 2026, and then Concord blew up in their faces, taking an entire studio down with it. And now we have Hermen Hulst doing interviews with the Financial Times, trying to run damage control, saying that if they're gonna fail, he wants them to fail early and cheaply. Like, are you kidding me? There's absolutely nothing cheap about blowing hundreds of millions of dollars on Concord just to yank it from the stores about 2 weeks later. And then there's definitely nothing cheap about spending billions of dollars to buy Bungie, handing them another massive budget to make Marathon, and then watching as the game struggles to even maintain 15,000 concurrent players around 2 months after it launched. It's almost like they're trying to gaslight us into believing these massive financial disasters are just a tiny little road bump, and it's just coming across as these guys are coping. So there's been an estimate saying that Marathon probably only sold around 1.2 million copies, bringing in about 55 million in gross revenue across all platforms. For a studio that cost Sony $3.6 billion, those numbers are pretty pathetic. Meanwhile, Slade Aspire 2 came out recently for a fraction of the price and immediately pulled in massive player numbers. Even independent studios on smaller budgets, like Claire Obscura Expedition 33 are dropping products that cost pennies compared to these AAA budgets, and they're pulling in 10 times the audience because they're actually making what people want to play. I mean, you don't need to look any further than Windrose right now. These guys are putting Ubisoft to shame over their continued attempts at reviving the pirate genre. But these corporate guys just don't get it. They look at Arc Raiders and see it pulling in almost 90,000 daily players and they think, oh, we just need to make our own version of that. They don't realize that gamers are already playing Arc Raiders and they don't need a second one. We don't have the time, the money, or the patience to grind through a second or third live service trap just because it has a Bungie logo slapped on the cover. If you want us to jump ship, you have to offer an experience that is mind-blowingly better, something unique in its own way, not just a carbon copy with a weirder art style. And let's talk about the actual game for a second, because Marathon mechanically isn't terrible. Almost everyone who's played the game can say that it feels really good to play. The gunplay is tight, the environments are pretty polished. When you're getting headshots, it feels like a Bungie game, but the aesthetic is just so bizarre and blocky that half the time, you can't even tell if you're shooting at a person or an NPC robot. Plus, the barrier to entry is pretty absurd. They slapped a $40 price tag on a genre that is predominantly free to play. And sure, Arc Raiders did that too, but they were also taking a pretty big risk there. The only difference is it just paid off for them. And Bungie is apparently punishing their own casual player base by making the game lean towards such a hardcore crowd. And that's the thing, is a 9-to-5 working grandma, grandpa, mom, dad gonna be able to keep up with this kind of grind? The answer is probably not. Most normal people with jobs and responsibilities don't want to spend their Friday night getting completely wiped out and losing all their loot to a squad of sweaty tryhards. It feels like the developers are entirely out of touch with what casual audiences need to stick around, relying completely on the hardcore players to carry the server costs. And that's not something you want to do with a $200 million game budget. And Sony is 10 toes deep into this live service push, and it's not stopping with Marathon. Now we have Guerrilla Games getting dragged into the mud with their upcoming Horizon Hunters Gathering game. Yeah, the same studio that gave us Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West is now running closed beta playtests for a co-op multiplayer live service game. They announced it back in February, and now they're running another playtest later this month on May 22nd. They've got modes like Machine Incursion, where you fight waves of robot dinosaurs, and Cauldron Descent, which is just some multi-stage trial room thing. I look at this and I just shake my head like, what are we even doing here? We already know where this story ends. They're taking a game that is beloved for its narrative and turning it into a microtransaction-filled mess. And even worse, it's got the cartoon Fortnite aesthetic to it. You've got the name Horizon, but you're catering to a completely different audience. This game isn't made for most fans of the Horizon series. It's just gonna be another product designed to squeeze gamers of their wallets. The creative director for Marathon is over here talking about how they want players to help shape the story over the next few years, and you actually need players for that to happen. You can't shape a community that doesn't exist, especially when you're alienating the old one that you already built up. I honestly miss the days when a studio like Bungie or Guerrilla could just put out a complete finished game without having to worry about a 10-year roadmap and a seasonal battle pass. Think about the original Halo trilogy. You bought the disc, you played the amazing campaign, and then you hopped into multiplayer with your buddies just to have fun. There wasn't some executive breathing down your neck trying to figure out how to monetize your screen time. Now it feels like every single AAA game is just a vehicle to sell you an in-game currency bundle, and developers are the ones who suffer for it. The talent at Bungie is getting pushed to the brink, suffering through wave after wave of layoffs just to keep the lights on, while the executives only care about the bottom line. It's just a depressing cycle of crunch, disappointment, and studio closures. I don't want to see Bungie fail. I don't want to see hundreds of talented artists and programmers losing their jobs because some suit in a boardroom thought that extraction shooters would be the future. But at the same time, we have to stop financially supporting this slop. If we keep buying into these predatory ecosystems, systems, they're just gonna keep making them. We just kinda have to let these games die so that the publishers learn the hard way that gamers actually value their time in their wallets. Sony got their hands burned with Concord, and now they're getting burned with Marathon. Let's just hope they figure it out before they ruin Horizon 2. Honestly, dude, I'm just concerned about gaming in general. Prices are skyrocketing, studios are getting shut down, games are taking about a decade to come out. It just seems like everything is going downhill unless these studios go back to what made them successful in the first place. Give us good, solid, polished experiences where we don't need constant internet connections just to play the single player. Games like Resident Evil Requiem just prove that the audience is still there and hungry for quality, handcrafted games without microtransactions shoved down our throats. I mean, they just released an entire game mode in a free update. Gamers are voting with their wallets and they're supporting the products that treat them like actual valued customers, not the publishers that are doing the same old tired trend-chasing nonsense. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a guy watching the industry set itself on fire, and I'm gonna do that while playing my Korean dating simulators. Anyway, this is RageWatch, and I'm out. Thanks for watching.